What if I told you there's a reason you've always felt like there's something more to your story? A reason certain moments, places, and people feel strangely familiar, almost like echoes from a life you don't consciously remember. Have you ever stepped into a building you've never seen before, and without thinking, instinctively turned down a hallway, knowing exactly where a hidden staircase would be? Maybe you've met someone for the first time, yet the connection was so instant, so overwhelming, it felt like you were picking up a conversation you started lifetimes ago. These moments don't make sense, not logically, but something deep in you knows they're real. It starts quietly. You're sitting at a cafe in a city you've never visited, sipping coffee and watching strangers pass by. Then, a sudden jolt, an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. You glance down the cobblestone alley beside the cafe and feel it in your bones. You've walked that path before, your heart races. You know what the door at the end of the alley looks like even though you've never seen it. When you walk toward it, everything falls into place, exactly as your intuition predicted. You might chalk it up to coincidence, but deep down, you know that's not it. Your mind may argue, your soul whispers the truth. These moments aren't random. They are the residue of something older, something buried just beneath the surface of your awareness. They are not memories in the traditional sense. They're not stored in your brain like yesterday's lunch or the name of your favorite song. Instead, they live deeper, embedded in your very cells. This is the realm of cellular memory, a phenomenon where the body remembers what the conscious mind cannot. Your soul carries more than light and love. It carries stories, pain, wisdom, trauma, and intuition that transcend a single lifetime. And every so often, it speaks. Maybe it's happened to you in subtler ways. You've always had an inexplicable fear of drowning, even though you've never had a near-death experience in water. You get anxious at the smell of firewood, or can't sleep if the closet door is open. You're drawn to specific eras in history, or languages roll off your tongue with ease, even though you've never studied them. These aren't accidents. They are fragments, threads that have followed you from one incarnation into the next, waiting for you to remember. The truth is, you've lived before. You've walked different lands, spoken other tongues, loved people with different names and faces, but your essence, your soul, has always been the same. And while your body is new, your soul carries a kind of spiritual fingerprint, an energetic imprint shaped by all your past experiences. That imprint influences the life you're living now more than you realize. The places you're drawn to, the people you instantly trust or mistrust, the talents you possess with no explanation, all of it is part of a soul pattern that began long before your current lifetime. The mind doesn't like this kind of mystery. It wants neat boxes. It wants logic. The mind will tell you that everything must come from what you've seen, heard, or learned in this life. It will insist that what you feel must be coincidence, or a trick of the brain. But the soul doesn't work that way. The soul doesn't argue. It remembers. It nudges. It knows. And when the soul speaks, it often bypasses the rational mind entirely. That's why these moments feel so strange. They're familiar, but unexplainable. Science is starting to catch up, slowly. Researchers are exploring the concept of genetic memory and cellular imprinting. They've observed transplant patients who acquire preferences and memories linked to their donors. They've recorded cases of children who remember details of lives they never lived. Still, mainstream explanations fall short because what we're dealing with here isn't simply biological. It's spiritual. This isn't about neurons and synapses. It's about consciousness, and the way your soul retains energetic signatures that last far beyond death. You've probably felt it without even knowing what to call it. That intuitive sense that something isn't right, only to find out later you were spot on, or a deep sadness that washes over you in a certain place, without warning or context. Or that strange sense of homesickness when you hear a language you've never spoken, or see artwork from a culture you've never visited. These are all breadcrumbs, clues your past lives have left behind. And they're not just emotional impressions, they're coded messages. Your soul has left a trail, and each fragment you uncover brings you closer to a deeper understanding of who you really are. Most people ignore them. They brush off the feelings, distract themselves, or rationalize them away. But you're not most people. You're here, reading this, feeling that quiet inner voice begin to stir, the one that already knows this is true. Because your past lives aren't just stories locked away in some spiritual vault, they're active forces, shaping your decisions, your relationships, your fears, your gifts. You've felt the remnants in moments of awe, terror, longing, or love. You've walked into this life carrying more than you could possibly unpack in one go, but that doesn't mean you can't start. So let's do exactly that. Because once you begin to understand how the soul leaves imprints across time, a whole new dimension of your life begins to open up. Your unexplained phobias, your strange attractions, your vivid dreams, and your intuition, they all start to make sense. And not only that, they start to guide you. In the chapters ahead, we're going to explore 10 of the strangest, most undeniable clues that reveal what your soul has been through before this lifetime. These aren't theories, they're experiences that people all over the world have reported with remarkable consistency, often with zero knowledge of reincarnation. You'll see how children describe past deaths with shocking accuracy, how people gain unlearned skills after near-death experiences, how birthmarks and physical traits line up with historical events they couldn't possibly know. We'll dive into real stories that challenge everything you've been taught about who you are and where you come from. But most importantly, we're going to shine a light on the clues you've been carrying all along, the ones that have followed you like shadows through time, the ones that don't fit into any box, but refuse to be ignored. You're not imagining it, you're not broken, you're remembering, and that changes everything, because the moment you begin to see these signs for what they are, you unlock something extraordinary, not just insight, but power, not just curiosity, but clarity. You begin to rewrite the patterns that no longer serve you, and awaken the ones that do. You stop repeating old cycles, and start honoring the wisdom you earned long ago. So ask yourself, what if the strangest things about you are actually the most sacred? What if your soul is trying to speak to you through the very things you've spent your life dismissing? What if every fear, every spark of knowing, every déjà vu and flash of recognition isn't random at all? What if it's memory, soul deep, timeless, waiting? And what if now, finally, you're ready to listen? What if I told you that every time you've experienced déjà vu, every time you've paused and said, "I swear I've been here before," you weren't hallucinating, you were remembering? Not in the way your mind typically stores memories, like where you parked your car, or what you ate for dinner last night, but something older, deeper, something your conscious mind has no file for because it didn't happen in this lifetime, it happened before. It happened in another body, in another time, maybe in another part of the world entirely. But it happened, and your soul never forgot. There's a moment when you walk into a room and your breath catches. Not because of the decor, not because of the people, but because something inside you whispers, "This place knows me." Your heart speeds up. Your eyes scan corners instinctively. You already know which hallway leads to a garden. You turn a corner, and just like that, there it is, a fountain, a gate, a staircase exactly where you felt it would be. Your mind scrambles to justify the feeling. Maybe you saw a photo somewhere. Maybe it's just similar to a place you visited once. But no matter how hard you try to rationalize it, the knowing won't leave you. That's not your imagination, that's your past speaking. Modern science calls it a memory glitch. Dr. Akira O'Connor, a cognitive psychologist who has studied déjà vu extensively, describes it as a misfire in the brain's memory system. His theory is that your brain gets confused between short-term and long-term memory, essentially marking a present moment as something you've already experienced. A clever theory, clean, clinical. It explains the sensation without acknowledging the mystery behind it. But here's where that explanation falls apart. Science can tell you how the glitch might happen, but it still can't tell you why the memory feels specific. It doesn't explain why people can describe places they've never been to, or predict elements of an environment they've had no access to. It doesn't explain knowing, because not all déjà vu is a trick of the mind. Some of it is soul memory. In spiritual regression therapy, practitioners have observed thousands of cases where individuals access lifetimes they have no conscious knowledge of. Under hypnosis or deep meditation, people describe ancient cities, specific house layouts, dialects, or cultural details with astonishing accuracy. Some even describe locations that were later verified by archaeologists. These aren't daydreams or fantasies, they're echoes, residual impressions stored in the energy field of the soul, imprinted by the intensity of past experiences. There was a woman who traveled to Prague for the first time. As she wandered through the narrow medieval alleys of the old town, she suddenly felt pulled down a path not marked on any tourist map. She followed the impulse without questioning it. At the end of the alley, she found an old stone courtyard, one that even locals had forgotten existed. The strange part? She had dreamt of that exact courtyard for years. Every detail matched: the cracks in the walls, the shape of the fountain, even the way the sunlight hit the stones at midday. No guidebook prepared her for that. No photograph could have planted the image. It wasn't fantasy, it was memory. In another case, a man visited a monastery in Tibet, a sacred place he'd never studied or read about in detail. The moment he stepped inside, he walked past the tour group and moved directly toward a hidden prayer room behind an unmarked door. No one had told him it was there, no signage pointed the way. But he knew. He entered the room, sat down on the ancient floor, and began to cry. Not because he was overwhelmed, but because he remembered. He remembered being there before, sitting in that exact spot, whispering prayers in a language he no longer spoke. These experiences don't follow the rules of logic. They follow the traces of emotional and spiritual memory. The soul doesn't operate through the language of facts and data. It speaks through energy, through feelings, through sudden moments of deep knowing. That's why déjà vu feels so real. It's not just a moment that feels familiar. It's a memory your body and spirit are reacting to before your mind has time to process it. And it's not always beautiful or profound. Sometimes, déjà vu hits you with a sense of dread. You turn a corner in a foreign city, and suddenly your stomach drops. You feel sick. You want to leave immediately. You don't know why, but everything in your system is screaming, "Get out." Later, you might discover that area was once a site of mass violence or deep suffering. You didn't read about it, no one told you, but your soul knew, because you were there, maybe as a victim, maybe as a witness, maybe in a completely different role. But some part of your energetic field remembers the weight of that space. This is called a sensory imprint. The emotion, the energy, the trauma, it all gets etched into your spiritual body. Our souls are incredibly sophisticated record keepers. They hold on to patterns, not just thoughts. They store emotions, fears, sensations, and reflexes. That tightness in your chest when you hear a certain name, that comfort you feel in an old church, the way your palms sweat in small spaces. These are not random triggers. These are echoes. You're not remembering details in your mind. You're reliving them in your nervous system. And it happens most often when you're near something that your soul has touched before, physically, emotionally, energetically. Think about how many times you've had that moment. You meet someone and feel like you've known them forever. You walk into a house that feels like home, even though you've never been there. You get chills when you stand in front of a painting or an ancient statue, and you don't know why. These are déjà vu experiences too, not in the cinematic, surreal way that always makes your heart race, but in the quieter, softer ones that say, "You've done this before." Now imagine how many of these moments you've dismissed. How many times you've brushed them off as coincidence, as mental noise, as tricks of perception, because we're taught not to trust our knowing. We're told to explain everything, to lean on logic, to silence anything that doesn't fit into a neat scientific category. But if you're here now, reading this, it's likely because you've started to question that programming. You've begun to listen again, and once you begin to listen, you'll notice more. You'll notice that certain people bring out reactions in you that have no explanation. You'll notice that some choices feel inevitable, like paths you're walking again. You'll notice that some of your passions and fears make more sense when you consider that they didn't start in this life. They came with you, carried like spiritual luggage, from lifetime to lifetime, hidden under layers of personality and memory. Déjà vu isn't always a mystical lightning bolt. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it shows up in your dreams, or in a scent that sends you reeling, or a phrase in a language you shouldn't understand but do. It's subtle, it's fleeting, but it's powerful. And once you learn to recognize it not as confusion, but as communication, everything begins to shift, because you're not broken, you're not imagining things. You're remembering, and each moment of déjà vu is a door. A portal to a lifetime your conscious mind can't grasp, but your soul has never left. And that's only the beginning. What if I told you that the fear keeping you up at night, the one that makes no sense, the one you've never been able to explain, isn't from this life at all? Maybe you've never almost drowned, but just the thought of deep water makes your chest tighten. Maybe you've never been in a fire, but the sound of crackling wood sends you spiraling into panic. Maybe no one in your life has ever pushed you off a height, but you can't walk across a second-floor balcony without your knees shaking. And despite your best efforts to rationalize it or outgrow it, the fear remains, persistent, irrational, and deeply embedded in your nervous system. That's because it didn't start here. It started somewhere else. In another life, another body, another ending you never consciously lived through, but your soul did. We like to believe that our fears are logical, or at the very least explainable. A fear of dogs because you were bitten once. A fear of public speaking because you were laughed at as a child. We map our wounds to moments, but what happens when there's no moment to point to? What happens when the fear is so strong, yet there's no memory to anchor it? That's where the cracks in the logic begin to show. That's where we find something deeper, something older, the emotional residue of a trauma you didn't just survive, you died from it. And even though your body is new, your soul remembers the ending. Fear is not always irrational. Sometimes, it's misplaced. It's real, but it's rooted in the wrong timeline. When a soul experiences death in a traumatic or sudden way, especially one that's emotionally charged or violent, that memory can bleed through into the next incarnation. This is what regression therapists call emotional carryover or bleed-through. The physical event may be long gone, but the energetic imprint remains, like a scar etched onto your spirit. Picture this. A child refuses to bathe, screams when near a tub, not splashing or fussing, but pure terror, full-body panic. The water hasn't hurt them. There's been no incident, no near drowning, nothing for their parents or doctors to point to, but the fear is overwhelming. Under gentle past life regression, the child later describes drowning in a storm, on a ship, alone, the cold water closing in as they struggled to scream. The fear wasn't imagined, it was remembered, and once it was brought into the light, it began to loosen its grip. This isn't a rare story. There are thousands of them. People who develop intense, lifelong fears, without any trauma in their current life to explain them. A woman who hyperventilates at the sight of fire, only to recall, during regression, burning in a public execution centuries ago. A man who suffers from uncontrollable anxiety in tight spaces, only to remember being trapped and buried alive during a war. These fears don't respond well to therapy or medication, because they don't belong to this life. They belong to another. The body carries physical trauma. The soul carries energetic trauma. And what most people don't realize is that death leaves a very specific kind of energetic signature, especially when it's sudden, violent, or emotionally charged. That energy doesn't just vanish. If it's not resolved, it transfers into the next lifetime, into the next body, into the next version of you. You may not remember being on a battlefield, but your body does. That panic you feel when you hear sudden loud bangs, the instinct to duck, to cover your ears, to run, that's not your imagination. It's memory. You may not remember being held underwater, but your lungs clench as if you do. You may not remember falling from a cliff, but your legs turn to jelly at the edge of a balcony. These are not random phobias. They are past life echoes, playing out in the theater of your current body. The term emotional bleed through describes how unresolved trauma seeps from one life into another. It's not limited to fear. It can show up as chronic pain, as irrational guilt, as a need to protect others at all costs. You might carry an overwhelming sense of responsibility for something you never did. You might sabotage relationships that feel too good, or reject success before it fully forms, all because a part of you remembers what happened the last time you reached that height, and it ended in pain. Children show these signs most clearly, especially before the age of 7. Their connection to previous incarnations is still fresh. The veil hasn't thickened yet. That's why they often say things that shock their parents. I died in a fire. I used to be a soldier. My other mommy had red hair. It's not make-believe. It's memory, still raw, still accessible, and often, still painful. but it doesn't stop at childhood. Adults experience emotional bleed-through every day. You just call it anxiety. You call it avoidance. You call it fear of flying, fear of intimacy, fear of authority. But these fears didn't originate in this lifetime. They're symptoms of unfinished trauma. And if you've tried everything, therapy, medication, exposure, and nothing has worked, that's your biggest clue. The root isn't in this soil. Here's the beautiful part. When you identify the source, when you remember, even faintly, something begins to shift. The fear starts to lose its grip. Your soul exhales. It's not about reliving the trauma. It's about acknowledging it, naming it, understanding it, bringing it into the conscious mind, where it can no longer hide in the shadows. Once that happens, healing becomes not just possible, but rapid. There's a reason why people walk out of regression sessions with phobias completely gone. Not managed, gone. Because once the soul feels seen, it no longer needs to scream. Once the memory is validated, the fear loses its power. It's no longer a mystery, it's a message that has finally been delivered. This is the unseen architecture of your inner world. Every irrational fear, every unexplained trigger, every panic that has no obvious cause, these are breadcrumbs. Follow them, and they will lead you to parts of yourself you didn't even know existed. Parts that once felt powerless and afraid, but are now ready to be reclaimed, because you are not broken, you are not weak, you are not overreacting, you are remembering. And once you recognize your fears as messages instead of curses, everything changes. You begin to trace the energy backward. You realize that the fire you fear once consumed you, that the water you avoid once took your final breath, that the fall you dread once ended everything. But it's over now. You are not in that lifetime anymore. You are not trapped. You are not dying. You are waking up. The fear will still visit you, at times. That's okay. Let it come, but greet it differently. Greet it like an old wound, finally asking to be seen. Because when you stop fearing your fear, you begin to transform it. And in doing so, you don't just heal the present, you liberate the past. What if I told you the talent you've always had, the one no one taught you, the one that just came naturally, didn't start with you at all? That ability to pick up an instrument and play by ear, the way you just understand how machines work, your uncanny knack for language, poetry, or healing, none of it is random. You weren't simply gifted in this life. You brought those abilities with you. They are echoes of skills your soul spent lifetimes mastering. And while your conscious mind might feel like it's starting from scratch, your soul remembers every note, every line of code, every whispered phrase in a language you've never studied but somehow already know. Xenoglossy is one of the most haunting and powerful pieces of evidence that past lives aren't just possible, they're real. It's the ability to speak, write, or understand a language you've never been exposed to in this lifetime. Imagine sitting in a regression session, slipping into a relaxed state, and suddenly beginning to speak fluent German, or Sanskrit, or Old Norse, even though you've never studied it. Your accent is native, your grammar is flawless. You say things you don't consciously understand, but somehow, the words flow effortlessly from your mouth. Then, once you return to your waking state, the ability vanishes. You can't explain it, but you felt it. You were that person, someone who once lived, breathed, and thought in that tongue. This isn't just spiritual theory. It's been documented over and over. Individuals who begin speaking languages that had died out centuries ago. Children who understand dialects from distant countries without any cultural exposure. Adults who, under hypnosis, recall lifetimes where they used these languages daily. These aren't cases of imagination or chance. Linguists have analyzed these speech patterns and confirmed the accuracy. The cadence, vocabulary, syntax, down to the regional accent, match up with time periods and dialects the subjects had no access to. You can't guess your way into a dead language, you can only remember it. But it doesn't stop with language. Some people pick up a musical instrument for the first time and play with the ease of someone who's trained for years. No lessons, no reading sheet music, just pure instinct. Their fingers remember something their mind has yet to learn. Others begin sketching with master-level accuracy, or fix complex engines intuitively, or know how to handle animals with uncanny grace. There are children who draw architectural designs far beyond their level of education. Teenagers who sit at a piano and play with emotion they shouldn't yet understand. These aren't miracles, they're reactivations. Skills refined across multiple incarnations and brought forward into this one. Your soul doesn't just carry trauma from your past lives, it carries talent, it carries knowledge, wisdom, muscle memory that exists beyond the physical body. And sometimes, all it takes is a trigger, a sound, a scene, a sensation, to awaken it. You might be drawn to martial arts, even though you've never practiced. You step onto the mat, and your body moves before your instructor even finishes the demonstration. Your stances feel ancient, familiar. You don't just learn, you remember. Or maybe you've always been obsessed with medicine. You know how to read symptoms, feel into diagnoses, prescribe with accuracy beyond your training. You call it intuition. You call it being a fast learner. But maybe, just maybe, you were once a healer in another time, perhaps even in multiple lifetimes. You treated the sick when medicine was still herbs and breath and hands. That imprint didn't vanish, it followed you here. Regression therapy often uncovers these memories. Not just the deaths or traumas of past lives, but the expertise. People recall themselves as calligraphers in ancient China, as sailors navigating the stars without instruments, as cooks, warriors, artists, or scholars. And what's more incredible is how these memories explain their current life's path. A woman who's always loved herbal medicine, who never felt at home in modern pharmaceutical systems, recalls a past life as an apothecary in Renaissance Italy. A man who builds boats for a living sees himself working on Viking ships, understanding wind and water like extensions of his own breath. These aren't romantic fantasies, they're consistent, detailed, and verifiable. Sometimes the skills show up in less obvious ways. You might be amazing with animals, able to soothe even the most aggressive dog or sense exactly what a cat needs. You feel more at home in nature than in cities. You're sensitive to changes in the environment, to shifts in energy, weather, or human emotion. You're empathic, intuitive, you know things. People come to you for advice, even when you're the youngest one in the room. You might think you were just born wise, but wisdom is earned, and you've earned it before. There's a reason certain things feel effortless to you, and there's a reason you're drawn to the specific skills and crafts you are. It's not random, you didn't choose them, they chose you. Or rather, your soul brought them along because they were never lost. They were waiting, dormant but intact, beneath the surface of this life, until you were ready to use them again. This also explains why you might feel out of place in your own culture or education system, why the things you're expected to be good at feel foreign to you, while the things no one taught you seem to light you up from within. Your curriculum is ancient. Your training took place long before this classroom, this job, this society. You might be a seamstress from the 80s trapped in a corporate office, a composer from Vienna in the body of a shy teenager, a spiritual teacher born into a family that doesn't believe in any of it. And yet, the pull remains. The abilities remain. Sometimes you'll find yourself solving problems in ways no one else would think of. You'll have answers that surprise even you. Not because you're making them up, but because part of you remembers what it was like to navigate similar situations, perhaps as a strategist, a negotiator, a tribal elder. You've done this before. And if you've ever felt like you don't fit in this time, maybe it's because you're carrying echoes from others. You may never unlock the full scope of what you've brought with you, but you don't need to. What matters is this: if you've ever looked at your hands and wondered how they know what they're doing, if you've ever opened your mouth and surprised yourself with your own fluency or insight, if you've ever felt a pull to a craft, a trade, a calling that makes no logical sense, you're not discovering something new, you're remembering something old. Your soul has lived before. It has built, sung, healed, fought, taught, and created in ways that still pulse through your energetic field. This life is not a blank slate. It's a canvas layered with countless other masterpieces underneath. And every time you trust your instincts, follow your curiosities, or honor the gifts that come without explanation, you peel back the layers and let that ancient light shine through. What if I told you that one of the most powerful, most transformative moments of your life was never random? That instant connection you felt with someone you just met, that overwhelming sense of familiarity you couldn't explain, that magnetic pull that felt both ancient and brand new, wasn't just chemistry or chance. It was memory, it was recognition, it was two souls, meeting again in a new chapter of a story that's been unfolding across lifetimes. You've felt it. Maybe it lasted only a moment. Maybe it changed the course of your entire life. You met someone's eyes and everything paused. Something inside you whispered, "I know you." But your mind couldn't explain it. There were no memories to pull from, no shared history in this life. And yet, the connection was instant, deeper than logic, older than words. That wasn't a trick of the heart. That was soul recognition. Souls don't travel alone. They move through lifetimes in groups, soul families, karmic partners, twin flames, kindred spirits. These are the souls you've danced with again and again across time, sometimes as lovers, sometimes as friends, sometimes as parents or children, or even adversaries. The roles may change, the costumes may shift, but the bond remains. There's a reason certain people feel like home within seconds. There's a reason some relationships feel so charged, so significant, even if they're brief. That connection is the residue of a contract made long before this life began. Imagine walking through a crowded airport. People move past you in every direction, hundreds of faces, none of them familiar. Then, suddenly, your eyes lock with someone, and something shifts. It feels like the world goes quiet. You don't know their name, but you know their energy. You feel a flicker of emotion, joy, grief, longing. You don't understand, but you feel. You exchange a few words, maybe a conversation, maybe nothing at all, but you walk away changed. That's not coincidence, that's remembrance. A flicker of recognition between souls who've met before, who may have shared lifetimes together, and are now crossing paths again. Some people describe it as a pull. They can't stay away. No matter how hard they try, they keep circling back to that one person. Even when it doesn't make sense, even when it's complicated, inconvenient, or illogical. The connection is undeniable. This can be a sign of a karmic bond, unfinished business between souls that draws them back into each other's orbit for resolution, growth, or closure. These relationships can be beautiful, but they're not always easy. In fact, the most intense soul connections often come with the most difficult lessons. Because that's what they're designed for, evolution. You didn't meet them by chance. You met them because your soul needed what only they could bring out in you, whether that was healing, awakening, surrender, or strength. You've likely felt this with romantic partners, with best friends, or even with people you clashed with immediately. Not all soul recognition is soft. Sometimes it comes with fire. Sometimes you meet someone and you just can't stand them, but you can't forget them either. That emotional intensity is often a sign of deep, past life entanglement, perhaps unfinished karma, perhaps a betrayal or loss that still lingers in your energetic field. There are real cases of people who've reconnected with souls from past lives and remembered specific details. A man in South America dreamed of a woman's face for years before meeting her in real life, thousands of miles away. When they met, they both burst into tears. Neither understood why at first, but through spiritual regression, they both described a lifetime where they had been lovers during a war, separated by violence and death. That moment of reunion was their first chance, in centuries, to finish what had been left undone. Another story tells of a child in Southeast Asia who clung to a woman visiting his village. The child was inconsolable unless she held him. The woman had never met the child, but she felt a strange comfort in his presence. Under guided meditation, she recalled a lifetime as the child's mother, dying in childbirth and promising to return. The child had waited. The reunion brought a sense of peace to them both that nothing else could. These aren't isolated cases. Around the world, people have described spontaneous moments of recognition, people they felt they'd known forever, dreams that came true upon meeting someone, and relationships that felt like remembering more than discovering. You've likely experienced it yourself, that best friend you connected with instantly, that partner you trusted from day one, that teacher or mentor who saw into your soul before you even spoke. You didn't build those bonds from scratch, you picked up where you left off. These reunions serve a greater purpose. They aren't just about comfort or connection, they're catalysts. When you reunite with someone from your soul group, your growth accelerates. You feel seen in a way that awakens dormant parts of you. You're challenged, inspired, pushed to evolve. These people mirror parts of your soul you've forgotten. They hold you accountable to your highest self. They remind you of who you are beyond your trauma, your personality, your ego. And in doing so, they unlock something sacred. Not all of these reunions are meant to last. Some are fleeting. A conversation on a train, a 3-week love affair, a friendship that burns bright and then fades. But the impact is permanent. The soul doesn't measure time the way the mind does. 5 minutes with a soul you've loved across lifetimes can shift you more than 5 years with someone else. That's why you still think about them. That's why certain memories stay vivid long after they end. Because at the soul level, nothing is ever truly over. You might be wondering how to know for sure if someone is from your soul group. The truth is, you feel it. The signs are there. Time warps when you're with them. You feel safer, more real. Conversations go deeper than surface talk. Silence between you isn't awkward, it's rich. There's a sense of déjà vu, of ease, of intensity. Maybe you dream of them before you meet. Maybe your lives mirror each other in strange ways. Maybe you grow faster in their presence than you ever have alone. These are the threads that connect souls through lifetimes. And if you haven't met anyone like this yet, don't worry, you will. Soul contracts are written into the blueprint of your life. These meetings are timed to perfection. They often arrive when you least expect them, but exactly when your soul is ready. All you have to do is stay open, follow your instincts, pay attention to who stirs something in you, something old, something unexplainable, something that feels like coming home. Because in this vast world of billions, there are people walking around right now who have loved you before, fought beside you, cried with you, helped you awaken in lifetimes you no longer consciously remember. They are here again, scattered across the map, each carrying a piece of the puzzle you're trying to complete. And when the moment comes, when your paths cross and your eyes meet, you'll feel it. You won't need proof, you'll just know. What if I told you that the mark on your body, the one you were born with and never thought much about, might be the only visible clue left from a death you once lived through? That small patch of skin, that strange discoloration, that unusual shape on your shoulder, chest, back, or neck. What if it wasn't random? What if it was the echo of a wound, a scar that didn't just belong to this body, but to a body your soul once inhabited in a life long gone? You've probably been told birthmarks are genetic quirks or minor developmental irregularities, harmless, meaningless. But what if they're not? What if they are the last trace of a trauma so intense that your soul carried it across the veil of death and into a new form? Because while the mind may not remember what happened in those final moments of a past life, the soul does. And the body, this current body, sometimes carries the story in plain sight. All over the world, people have been born with strange and sometimes disturbing birthmarks that seem to mirror wounds that have no connection to their present life. A child is born with a long, thin, scar-like mark down the chest, another with a round, dark spot on the back of the head. No medical condition explains it. The family shrugs it off. But the child grows up with recurring dreams of being shot, stabbed, burned, or wounded in a way that directly matches the location and shape of their birthmark. Over time, more details emerge. Places, names, events. Some even remember who they were and how they died. And when those memories are investigated, the results are chilling. Imagine a young boy in Southeast Asia who has a jagged birthmark across his neck. From an early age, he tells his family that he was once a man who died after being slashed across the throat. He gives the man's name, describes the village, even recalls the names of family members. The boy's parents, unsure what to believe, do some digging. To their shock, they find out that a man with that exact name died in that exact way, his throat slit, in a neighboring village just a few years before the child was born. The scar the boy carries matches the autopsy report of the wound that killed the man. The timelines align too perfectly to ignore. This isn't an isolated incident. Thousands of similar cases have been documented around the world, from India to Turkey to the United States. children born with marks that mirror bullet wounds, surgical scars, burns, or blunt trauma, describing deaths that occurred before they were born, often with astonishing accuracy. The location, shape, and size of the birthmark often align with the cause of death in the remembered life. In some cases, two matching marks appear, one on the entry point of a bullet, the other on the exit. It defies medical explanation. But it makes perfect sense if you consider that the soul, upon reincarnating, still holds the energetic imprint of how it left the previous body. There's something powerful about the idea that your body remembers what your mind forgets, that even if your conscious awareness is wiped clean between lives, your soul still carries a record, and your skin sometimes reflects it. We tend to think of memory as something locked inside the brain, but that's a limited view. Memory is energy, and energy doesn't die, it transforms. The trauma you carried through death doesn't disappear just because you were born anew. Sometimes, it lands in the very tissue of your next incarnation. You may have a birthmark on your wrist and find you've always been sensitive about people grabbing you there, or a mark on your lower back that tingles when you're afraid. Maybe you've avoided certain environments or situations your whole life, and only later realize they align with the kind of death your mark might represent. Your body is not a blank canvas, it is layered with stories. Some of them belong to this life, many do not. It's not just the marks themselves, it's the behavior that often accompanies them. Children with birthmarks tied to violent deaths in past lives often display phobias or fears directly related to those deaths. A child with a mark over the chest might develop an irrational fear of being shot or stabbed. One with a throat mark might resist wearing turtlenecks or scarves. Another with markings over the stomach may panic at the thought of hospitals or surgery. These aren't learned behaviors, they emerge early, long before external influence. The correlation is too consistent to dismiss. And while birthmarks can sometimes signal trauma, they can also be symbolic. There are cases of people born with marks in the shape of objects or symbols connected to their past life identity, initials, emblems, even tools of a profession. A violinist reborn with faint lines on the shoulder where the instrument once rested. A monk reborn with a mark in the shape of a flame near the heart. These aren't wounds, they're signatures. The soul, carrying not just pain but purpose, inscribes itself on the body like a watermark on paper, subtle but undeniable, once seen. Not everyone with a birthmark is carrying past life trauma, and not every mark tells a story. But if you've ever looked at yours and felt something, curiosity, unease, or a sense that it means something, it's worth paying attention. The body speaks in its own language. It tells stories without words, and when you learn how to listen, you start to see the map it's been holding all along. This map doesn't just point to death, it points to unfinished business. Often, the birthmark serves as a portal, not just to remember how you died, but to understand what still needs to be healed. A wound carried into a new life may indicate unresolved emotion, fear, anger, betrayal, guilt. And by bringing it into conscious awareness, by recognizing its origin, you begin to alchemize it. The mark doesn't disappear, but its meaning evolves. What once symbolized pain now becomes a badge of survival, a reminder that you've lived before and lived again. Think of how powerful that is. You are living proof that the soul transcends death. That memory, in its deepest form, isn't confined to the mind. It exists in your blood, your bones, your skin. You carry the echoes of what you've been through, not to burden you, but to awaken you. Every scar, every mark, every strange feature that's always felt different, could be a key, a portal to understanding the larger story your soul has been writing across time. And when you begin to see your body not just as flesh and blood, but as a vessel of accumulated lifetimes, everything changes. You start to walk differently, look at yourself differently. You treat your fears with more compassion, you trust your intuition more deeply, because you understand that the mystery of you didn't begin at birth, it began long before. And part of that mystery, part of that ancient truth, is written into your skin like ink that never fades. What if I told you that the place you feel most at home might be somewhere you've never been before? That city you dream about, that country that pulls at your heart, that ancient ruin that brings you to tears without reason, You weren't just imagining it, you were remembering. And the reason your soul stirs at the sound of that language, the smell of that food, or the sight of those landscapes, is because part of you has already been there. Not in this lifetime, but in another. And the land has not forgotten you. It begins with a feeling. Maybe you're scrolling through images online and stop suddenly. You see a photo of a cobblestone street, or a mist-covered mountain, or an old weathered temple, and something inside you shifts. It's not curiosity. It's not wanderlust. It's recognition. You stare a little longer than you should. Your chest tightens. You feel longing, as if something precious has been lost. You don't know why this image makes you feel so much, but it does. That is geographic soul memory. It's when your spirit reacts to a place your body has never visited, a place your mind can't identify, but your heart already knows. These moments don't come from nowhere. They are echoes of past lives, lived in different lands, different cultures, climates, and civilizations. Maybe you once lived in the icy mountains of Tibet, or the lush green fields of Ireland, or a sun-drenched village in northern Africa. Your name was different, your language was different, but your soul remembers the air, the way the sky looked at dusk, the sound of the marketplace or the silence of the desert. You might have walked through the narrow alleys of an ancient city, served tea in a temple, fought in a war, raised children, or died with the scent of that land in your lungs. And now, centuries later, something in your current life brings that place back to you, like a whisper across time. There are countless real-world accounts of people navigating foreign places with eerie familiarity. A woman on her first trip to Greece steps off the boat and bursts into tears. She doesn't know why. The architecture feels familiar. The sea feels like an old friend. As she walks through a small island town, she turns down alleys she's never seen, instinctively taking the most direct route to a hidden courtyard tucked away from the main roads. Her guide is shocked. He tells her most locals don't even know that part of the town exists, but she knew, not in her mind, but in her bones. A young man visits Kyoto and feels overwhelmed the moment he steps into an old shrine. Not overwhelmed by beauty, but by grief. As he walks the worn stone path through the temple grounds, tears stream down his face. He can't explain why, but the sound of the wind in the bamboo, the smell of the incense, and the rustle of his footsteps feel too familiar. Later, during a meditation session, he recalls a life as a monk who once took a vow of silence in that very place. The memory wasn't detailed or cinematic, it was emotional, and that's often how soul memory speaks, through feeling first, clarity second. Some people are drawn to specific architectural styles or time periods without ever studying them. You might have an inexplicable obsession with Moorish design, or Gothic cathedrals, or ancient Roman baths. You don't know where it comes from. No one in your family shares this fascination. But every time you see images from those places, something inside you awakens. That pull is not just aesthetic, it's energetic. It's your soul saying, I've stood in that place before, I've called it home, and it's not always joyful. Some geographic memories come with heaviness, even dread. You might step into a city and instantly feel the urge to leave. You can't breathe, your heart pounds. The streets feel haunted, though nothing around you looks threatening. That could be location karma, energy imprints from a past life that ended in tragedy or fear. Just as a person can trigger emotional residue from a past incarnation, so can a place. The ground remembers, the land holds energy. And if you left that place with unresolved pain, your return in this life, even if just as a tourist, can stir up everything you never got the chance to heal. Temples, ruins, and sacred sites often trigger this kind of response. There's a reason why people break down in tears at places like Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat, or the Egyptian pyramids. It's not just awe, it's not just history. It's spiritual resonance. Your body may be experiencing something for the first time, but your soul is walking familiar ground. You might not consciously recall the rituals, the chants, the robes, or the teachings, but you feel the weight of it. You feel the sanctity of the space, and sometimes, the land feels like it's remembering you too. These places don't call you randomly. You're drawn to them for a reason. There may be lessons waiting there, healing, clarity, or activation. Some people find their life's purpose only after visiting a specific country. Others fall in love with a language they never thought to learn, and pick it up with surprising ease. You may find that your creativity, intuition, or energy shifts dramatically when you're in certain regions of the world. That's location, energy, vibrational resonance between your soul and the land. Some places recharge you, others challenge you, but they all speak to different versions of who you've been. Even if you never get the chance to physically travel to the places that call to you, the connection is still real. Dreams, meditations, art, and sound can all trigger the same memory pathways. If you find yourself painting landscapes of countries you've never seen, or dreaming in a language you don't speak, or writing stories set in ancient worlds you've never studied, trust it. Your soul is leading you back through the frequency of memory. You don't need a plane ticket to access that, you just need presence. And the more you tune in to these subtle pulls, the more you begin to understand that you are not just from one place. You are from many places. You are a mosaic of lands and lifetimes, of cities that no longer exist, and villages still standing quietly under the stars. The way your heart aches for places you've never been isn't a sign of confusion, it's a form of homesickness, soul homesickness, and it's one of the clearest signs that you've lived before. The earth holds your footprints in places your current body hasn't yet walked, and when you finally return, whether in this life or the next, you will know. Not because of maps or guides, but because something deep within you will rise to the surface and whisper, "We are back." What if I told you that some of your most vivid, most haunting dreams aren't dreams at all? They're memories. Not from this life, but from lives you've lived before. Lives your conscious mind has long forgotten, but your soul never stopped remembering. You wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, trying to shake off the last fragments of a war you were never in, a death you never experienced, or a city you've never seen but somehow knew every corner of. The clock tells you it was just a dream, but your body says otherwise. And deep down, you know, it was real. You've probably had one. That recurring dream that always comes back, year after year. Maybe the faces change, but the setting is eerily familiar. Maybe the moment is always the same. You're running, hiding, fighting, falling, or watching everything go silent. The dream never finishes. It always ends just before the climax. Or maybe it ends in death, and you wake up gasping, your heart pounding like a drum inside your chest. The fear lingers for hours, sometimes days. You try to brush it off as stress or imagination. But the truth is, your subconscious is speaking, and it's speaking the language of the soul. Not all dreams are symbolic. Not all dreams are rooted in fantasy or processing daily life. Some are transmissions. They slip through the cracks of time when your waking mind is quiet. They bypass logic and speak in image, emotion, energy. These are not dreams crafted by your imagination. They are fragments of your personal history, soul flashbacks from lifetimes your spirit is still trying to integrate. It often begins subtly, a dream with architecture that doesn't exist in the modern world. You walk through a marketplace made of stone and mud, hear a language that sounds both foreign and familiar. You look down and your hands aren't your own. Your reflection is different. You're not you, but somehow you are. Other times, it's violent. You're in the middle of a battle, or a house fire, or a storm at sea. The fear is so visceral it wakes you. And yet there's no context from your current life that explains why that dream would be so intense. That's the giveaway. When the emotion in a dream outweighs the logic, you're not just dreaming, you're remembering. Time-specific imagery is another telltale sign. You dream of being in a city that doesn't exist anymore. You wear clothes from a different era. You use tools or weapons you've never seen in real life, but your hands know exactly what to do. You speak in a language you don't recognize, and yet, in the dream, you understand every word. You see your family, but they're not your family from this life. You love them. You lose them. You die with them. And then you wake up and feel like something sacred was ripped away from you. The grief is real. Because the memory is real. Many people report dreams of being executed, drowning, falling from great heights, or being trapped. These are not abstract symbols. These are reflections of how they may have died in a previous life. The body remembers trauma through sensation, the soul remembers through dreams. And when your waking life doesn't give you space to process what's unhealed, your subconscious does it for you at night. That's why these dreams often repeat. Your soul is trying to finish something that was left undone. It's trying to make peace with a moment you never got to understand, or fully experience, before your last breath. The mind has its own defenses. It blocks what it can't comprehend, but sleep lowers those defenses. In the dreamscape, you are no longer bound by time, identity, or language. You are free to return, free to see, free to feel. And while this can be overwhelming, it can also be healing, because every dream that carries a soul memory is an opportunity to witness your own journey, across timelines, across bodies, across deaths and rebirths. The key is learning how to decipher them. Not every intense dream is a past life memory, but when the imagery is historically consistent, the emotions are profound, and the narrative feels complete or cyclical, those are strong indicators. One way to begin is to keep a dream journal. The moment you wake, before the logic of the day sets in, write everything down. Colors, names, objects, feelings, even small details can hold great meaning. You may notice patterns that emerge over time, a certain city, a repeated name, a specific emotion tied to specific actions. These patterns are the breadcrumbs of your soul's history. Pay attention to emotional weight. When a dream leaves you sobbing or shaking, don't dismiss it. Ask yourself, why did that affect me so deeply? If the answer isn't found in this life, it's likely rooted in another. Meditation can help you explore this further. Drop into a quiet space, revisit the dream visually, and allow your intuition to fill in the gaps. Sometimes, more memories will surface, faces you didn't recognize, but now do, actions you forgot, but now remember with startling clarity. Other times, you'll receive a simple knowing, not a movie playing in your head, but a quiet, undeniable truth that rises through your body. That was me, that happened, that pain is mine. You don't need to prove your dream is real to anyone. If your soul resonates with it, that's enough. Over time, as you work with these dreams, you may begin to feel a soft unraveling. The nightmare that once terrified you starts to lose its grip. The panic becomes curiosity, the grief becomes closure. That's when you know you've done the work. You've acknowledged the memory, and in doing so, you've transmuted it. It no longer needs to scream at you in the middle of the night. It's been seen. Some people experience dreams that serve as reunions. They meet a person they instantly love, a partner, a child, a friend. The emotion is overwhelming. They may not speak, but the connection is electric. You wake up in tears, not out of sadness, but because you felt love on a level that doesn't exist in waking life. That's a soul bond. And your dream was a space for reunion, even if only for a moment. These dreams can fuel you for weeks. They remind you that love is eternal, that the people you've lost are not gone, they've simply changed forms. And sometimes, your soul arranges a meeting in the space between waking and sleep. Lucid dreaming can also be a powerful tool. When you become aware inside the dream, you can ask questions. What year is this? What is my name? Why am I here? The answers don't always come in words. Sometimes they come in sudden flashes, images, or sensations. But when you're awake inside the dream, you can become an explorer, walking the corridors of your own history, reclaiming pieces of yourself that have long been waiting to be found. Dreams aren't just fragments of thought, they are gateways. They are time machines. They are the one space where your soul can break through the veil without resistance. And when you begin to treat your dreams as sacred messages rather than mental noise, you open yourself to a deeper level of truth. You begin to see that your journey is not just what happens from birth to death in this life. Your journey is vast, interdimensional, eternal. So the next time you wake from a dream that shakes you, that leaves you breathless or broken or glowing with warmth, don't dismiss it. Sit with it, listen to it, write it down. That may be your soul whispering, remember who you've been. And in doing so, helping you understand who you truly are. What if I told you that the strangest things you did or said as a child, those moments your parents laughed off, those questions you asked that no one could answer, those sudden flashes of maturity or mystery, weren't random quirks of childhood at all? What if those early years were when your soul was speaking most clearly, before the noise of the world told you to forget, before logic stepped in, before conditioning silenced the ancient voice still echoing inside you? You probably don't remember it all now. Most people don't. But think back, just for a moment. Did you ever say something so strange, so specific, that it startled the adults around you? Did you know how to do something no one taught you? Did you talk about people or places your family had never mentioned? Maybe you told your parents that they weren't your real parents, that you had a different name, or lived in a different place, or died in a different way. And they laughed, maybe nervously, maybe dismissively, because what else were they supposed to do? You were just a child after all. Children have big imaginations, don't they? But what if those weren't just stories? What if those were memories? Children are closer to the veil than adults. Their souls haven't been buried under years of programming yet. For the first few years of life, they remain deeply connected to where they came from. They may not have the vocabulary to explain it, but they feel it. They see things most adults no longer can. They speak truths we've forgotten how to hear. And sometimes, they remember. Around the world, there are thousands of documented cases of children recalling vivid details of past lives. Specific names, dates, family members, homes, and even causes of death. These aren't vague impressions or symbolic dreams. These are crystal clear recollections, precise, often disturbing, and consistently verifiable. A child in India who remembered being murdered in a previous life led investigators to the village where the crime took place. He named his killer. He pointed out his former home. The details matched perfectly, including a scar that aligned with the fatal wound in his past body. No one could explain it, except to say, he remembered. In the United States, a young boy became obsessed with airplanes from World War II. He knew the names of obscure planes, the mechanics of engines, and specific combat maneuvers no child his age could have learned on his own. He began having nightmares of crashing, described the scene over and over. Eventually, he gave a name. The name matched a real pilot who had died in combat, someone no one in his family had ever heard of. His memories faded with age, but the impact never left. His parents, once skeptical, were left with no doubt. Their son had lived before. Why do these memories fade? Because around the age of 7, the human brain undergoes a shift. The ego solidifies. The analytical mind begins to take over. Children start conforming to the rules of the world around them. They're told what's real, what's appropriate, what's true. And slowly, the door begins to close. The memories become foggy. The stories become just dreams. The soul's voice is drowned out by the need to grow up. And just like that, a lifetime of ancient wisdom is locked away. But the signs are always there in early childhood. A girl who cries when she sees soldiers on TV, even though she's never learned about war. A boy who refuses to eat certain foods because he insists they made him sick last time. A child who draws maps of places she's never seen, or plays games involving rituals, symbols, and languages no one taught her. A toddler who speaks of their other family, or asks why they had to come back. These aren't ordinary musings. They're fragments, still raw and fresh, of something deeper than this life can contain. Sadly, most parents miss the signs, not out of neglect, but out of misunderstanding. In many cultures, children are told to stop talking nonsense. They're gently corrected, redirected, or ignored. Parents assume it's imagination or attention-seeking behavior. But in doing so, they unknowingly shut the door a little faster. They discourage the very memories that could offer healing, insight, or validation. Because when a child speaks about a past life, they're not trying to be clever, they're trying to be understood. And it's not just about memory, it's about emotion. Children who remember their past lives often carry the emotions of those lives with them. They may display unexplainable phobias, intense attachments, or sudden grief. A boy who insists on sleeping with the light on might have died in a dark place. A girl who panics when separated from her mother may have lost a child in her last life. These emotional imprints are real. They are not dramatic episodes, they are echoes. Even more fascinating is the presence of adult-level insight in very young children. A toddler who speaks about the soul, death, or the purpose of life with startling clarity. a preschooler who offers comfort to a grieving adult by saying, "They're not gone, they're just in a new story." Where do these ideas come from? They don't learn them from cartoons. They're not reading spiritual philosophy. These are truths the soul brings with it, and the younger the child, the closer they are to those truths. You might not remember what you said when you were 3, 4, or 5. But ask your parents. Ask if there was ever a time you mentioned another name, another family, another home. Ask if you ever spoke a different language in your sleep, or acted out scenarios that made no sense. Sometimes, the clues are hidden in the stories they love, the games they played, the things they feared. That pirate obsession might not have been just fantasy. That fixation with Egypt, or the stars, or swords, or herbal medicine, it may all have roots in a life you once lived, and even if those memories are gone now, their residue lingers. You might still carry the interests, talents, or wounds of that life. You may feel drawn to certain cultures, religions, or eras, without knowing why. You may have dreams that make no sense, or fears that seem to have no origin. That's the trace of a forgotten self, and the child you once were knew. So many of us search for our life's purpose in adult terms. We chase careers, relationships, and achievements. But what if the clearest clues to who you are came before you even knew how to spell your name? What if you've been living out the unfinished notes of your past all along, and the child inside you was trying to tell you that from the very beginning? The soul never forgets. It only waits. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, the child you used to be will whisper back, not in words, but in feelings, in fragments, in dreams, and déjà vu. And when you let yourself remember, not just what happened in this life, but what echoed in the ones before, you begin to understand the strange, miraculous, and layered journey that has always been yours. What if I told you that the passions you can't explain, the ones that seem to come from nowhere, are actually echoes of who you've been before? That your obsession with a certain culture, your deep love for a type of music, your natural talent for an instrument or craft you've never formally studied, none of it is random. These aren't quirks. They're not hobbies that happened by chance. They're soul preferences. Carryovers from lives your spirit has already lived, and the traces of which still pulse quietly beneath your skin. Think about it. Maybe you've always been drawn to Japanese calligraphy, but you've never lived in Asia, never studied the language, and no one in your family shares your fascination. Or maybe you feel a magnetic connection to Celtic music. Something about it makes you ache and light up at the same time, as if some ancient part of you is waking up with every note. Perhaps you find yourself inexplicably moved by the ruins of Rome, or the architecture of Moorish Spain, or the desert silence of North Africa. You look at photographs of these places, or hear their sounds, or watch films about their history, and you feel something shift inside you. It doesn't just look beautiful, it feels like home. That kind of resonance doesn't come from a casual interest, it comes from memory. Not the kind stored in your brain, but the kind imprinted into your soul. When you're deeply drawn to a culture, a place, or an era that has no direct link to your current life, chances are you've been there before. You've lived in that skin, you've spoken that language. You've walked those streets, prayed in those temples, danced to that rhythm, and your soul remembers what your mind has long forgotten. You may also find yourself picking up skills faster than others in very specific areas. You sit down at a piano, and your fingers already know where to go. You pick up a camera and instinctively frame a shot with the eye of a seasoned artist. You try your hand at weaving, or woodworking, or writing poetry, and something flows through you like you've done it 1,000 times. That's not just talent, it's re-accessed memory. It's not starting from zero, it's starting from already knowing. So many people mistake these gifts for coincidence or genetic luck. But talent often travels with the soul. In lifetime after lifetime, the essence of your core abilities persists. You may not express them in the same way every time. Maybe you were a stone sculptor in one life and now you're a digital designer. But the creative current is the same. The feeling of shaping something from raw material into beauty, that's what returns. That's what survives the veil. And the preferences aren't limited to beauty or art. They show up in how you live, your mannerisms, the clothes you gravitate toward, the way you hold a teacup, the rituals you instinctively create. A person who feels most at peace eating with their hands on the floor might have lived lifetimes in cultures where that was sacred tradition. Someone who lights candles every night without understanding why may be reenacting an ancient ceremony buried in their soul's memory. A love for open-air markets, mountain villages, sunlit courtyards, these aren't just aesthetic tastes. They're your soul remembering environments that once nurtured you. There's also the reverse. Things you're repelled by for no apparent reason. Maybe you've never liked certain types of clothing, or foods, or styles of music, and you don't know why. They just don't feel right. Maybe you feel uncomfortable in modern skyscrapers, or anxious in highly industrialized spaces. That could be your soul resisting an energy that doesn't match its preferred vibration, because, in another life, you lived closer to the land, or in harmony with natural rhythms, or in structures made of clay, stone, and wood, instead of metal and glass. The more you start to observe these patterns, the more you realize that your preferences, those things you've always just liked or disliked, aren't shallow, they're sacred. They are clues, pieces of a spiritual jigsaw puzzle that reveal the architecture of your past. They whisper truths that no textbook can teach you. You didn't choose them, they chose you, because they were part of you before you arrived here. People often say, "I was born in the wrong time," or "I don't belong in this generation." But what they're really expressing is a kind of soul dissonance. You feel out of place not because there's something wrong with you, but because your soul is remembering lifetimes when the world moved differently, when there was more silence, more ritual, more slowness. And it's not about wishing to go backward, it's about honoring that ancient part of yourself that still longs for depth, meaning, and a world that speaks its language. Even the kinds of people you're drawn to may reflect past life patterns. You might have a deep reverence for elders, or an immediate trust toward those with specific accents or cultural backgrounds. You might feel more alive around certain kinds of energy, warrior spirits, healers, mystics, because your soul has walked beside them before. You might even find yourself romantically attracted to people who remind you of someone your soul once loved centuries ago. It's all interconnected. Attraction is often memory in disguise. You don't need a regression session or a mystical vision to validate this. Just look at your life. Look at the hobbies you didn't have to learn, the passions you didn't have to be taught, the cravings that make no rational sense. Ask yourself why you've always felt compelled to read about certain civilizations, to collect objects from a particular region, or to spend hours immersed in a style of music that no one around you listens to. Your soul is pointing, it's always pointing. And when you honor those instincts, when you say yes to the things that call to you without logic, you unlock more than joy. You unlock remembrance. You reawaken dormant parts of yourself. You give yourself permission to be whole. You stop trying to fit your soul into the shape of this one life and begin to live as someone who has been many things, many places, and still carries all of it within. This isn't about getting lost in the past. It's about integrating it. Your soul didn't bring these preferences, talents, and fascinations here for nostalgia. It brought them here to be used. To help you remember your essence, to guide your purpose, to whisper, "This is who you are, this is who you've always been." So if you've ever wondered why you feel most alive speaking a language you've never been taught, why you cry when you hear a song you can't explain, why a certain landscape feels like the closest thing to truth, you're not crazy, you're not imagining it, you're remembering. And the more you listen, the more those carryovers begin to make sense, not as random quirks, but as sacred instructions. What if I told you that some of the hardest things you're dealing with right now, the repetitive patterns, the stuck emotions, the people you can't seem to let go of, didn't begin in this lifetime? That the pain you're trying to understand, the lessons you keep circling back to, the patterns that seem to follow you no matter how many times you try to break them, are echoes from something much older than this current version of you. Something unresolved, something unfinished. Karma isn't about punishment, it's about momentum. It's the spiritual law of energy continuing in motion until it is met with awareness, until it is healed, honored, or transformed. You are not being punished for who you were. You are being given a chance to integrate the lessons you once ran from. Life doesn't loop you back into suffering because the universe is cruel. It does so because your soul asked for another opportunity to evolve, to choose differently, to complete what was left undone. You may already feel this. Maybe you've noticed the same kind of person shows up in your life over and over, just wearing a different face. The same emotional triggers, the same abandonment, the same betrayal. And you start to ask yourself, why do I keep attracting this? Or, why can't I move on from this cycle? It's not weakness. It's not just poor choices. It's karmic residue. It's soul debris, pieces of old stories that haven't reached their conclusion. Unfinished business always comes back. Not to haunt you, but to free you. Relationships are often the clearest mirror of this. You meet someone and feel instantly connected, like you've known them forever. The bond is magnetic, intense, almost too much. And yet, something in you surrenders to it, even when it brings chaos. That's a karmic contract. You may have been lovers, siblings, parents, enemies, or friends in a previous life. Something was left unsaid, something was left unhealed. And now, in this life, you've met again, not to relive the pain, but to resolve it, to face the same choice under a new sky, and decide if you'll react or rise. But not all karma is romantic. Some of it lives in your finances. Maybe no matter how hard you work, you always feel like money slips through your fingers, or you self-sabotage just as things begin to flow. Maybe you carry shame around wealth, or guilt around asking for more. These are not random blocks. They are patterns born from lives where you may have abused wealth, or where you suffered from poverty that shaped your entire identity. The echo continues until it is met with understanding. Until your soul knows abundance is safe. Until it knows that wealth does not make you corrupt, and lack does not make you holy. Addiction can also be karmic. If you find yourself struggling with substances, obsessions, or compulsions that feel stronger than your will, consider that it may not have started here. You may have lived a life where you numbed your pain instead of healing it, where you died carrying emotional weight that never got to be expressed. That craving to escape, to check out, to soothe a bottomless ache, it may be rooted in emotional energy that was never witnessed in another timeline. And so it returns, not to destroy you, but to invite you to feel what you once ran from, to heal it in a way your past self never could. Even physical illness can carry karmic threads. Some people are born with chronic conditions or sensitivities that seem to have no clear medical explanation. But when you look deeper, when you tune into the emotional body, you may find that those symptoms align with trauma from a past life, a wound that never got to close. A throat that's always tight might reflect a lifetime where you were silenced or punished for speaking. A fragile heart might hold grief from a life where you lost everyone you loved. Your body remembers. Your soul keeps the score. So how do you know when you're facing unfinished business from another life? One of the clearest signs is repetition. If something painful keeps showing up in different forms, if you've done all the inner work you know how to do but the wound still bleeds, if you've forgiven, released, journaled, cried, and still feel the cycle looping, you're probably working through something that predates this body. Another sign is intensity. When your reaction to a person or situation is disproportionate to what's happening, there's often a deeper energetic charge behind it. You're not just reacting to what is, you're reacting to what was. And then there's the sense of inevitability. That feeling of being pulled into certain dynamics, almost against your own logic or desire. You try to resist, but something stronger keeps pulling you back. That's not weakness. That's your soul recognizing the contract. And contracts aren't broken by avoidance. They're completed through conscious engagement, through truth, through choice. The good news is this: karma is not a sentence. It's an invitation. It's your soul saying, this time, let's do it differently. And you don't have to remember the entire story to bring it to completion. You just have to become conscious in the present. When you feel the old pattern rising, pause. Ask yourself, what is the opposite of what I did last time? If you ran, stay. If you silenced yourself, speak. If you withheld love, offer it freely. If you were passive, reclaim your power. The moment you choose a new frequency, the karma begins to dissolve. The loop begins to unwind. Some people go through life unaware that they're living someone else's unfinished symphony. They fight battles that don't belong to this chapter. They repeat emotional scripts that feel ancient, yet invisible. But when you begin to see yourself through the lens of the soul, When you understand that this is one frame in a much longer film, everything changes. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What can I complete here?" That's when life becomes sacred again. That's when healing moves beyond symptom and into source. You may have come back to forgive someone you once hated. You may have returned to stand up where you once backed down, to love a child you lost, to speak a truth you once buried, to protect the innocent when you once stayed silent. And sometimes, you return simply to understand, to witness a pattern from a higher vantage point, and say, "Ah, now I see." Your soul is not interested in perfection. It's interested in growth. And karma isn't here to trap you. It's here to liberate you through awareness. The pain isn't punishment. It's a map, a signal, a reminder that your story is bigger than you think. And even if you can't see every chapter, you have the power to write the ending. So when life feels heavy, when the same door slams in your face for the 100th time, when your heart breaks along the same fault line, ask yourself, what am I still carrying? What am I being invited to resolve? And what would it look like to finally choose something new? Because you can. And when you do, you don't just heal this life. You ripple healing backward across time. You give peace to every version of you that never got the chance. What if I told you that you were never meant to forget who you really are? That the reason your past lives feel distant, clouded, or mystical isn't because they're impossible to access. It's because someone, or something, decided a long time ago that it was safer if you didn't remember. That there has been, for centuries, a quiet war against memory, against truth, against the natural birthright of your soul to know itself across time. This isn't just about spiritual belief. This is about control, because a person who knows their history can never truly be enslaved, and that's exactly why they needed you to forget. Reincarnation wasn't always treated like a fringe idea. In fact, for much of ancient history, it was accepted as common knowledge. Civilizations across continents, without contact, without shared language, all spoke of the soul's return. From the high Himalayan ranges of ancient India to the mystical schools of Egypt, from the philosophical writings of Greece to the oral traditions of indigenous tribes around the world, the idea that the soul lives many lives wasn't just accepted, it was central to how people understood existence. Death wasn't an end, it was a transition. Birth wasn't a beginning, it was a continuation. You weren't just one person, you were a soul walking through time, learning, evolving, remembering. But that kind of belief doesn't benefit institutions built on control. If you believe that you only live once, you become much easier to manipulate. If you think you were born flawed, that you need saving from something external, that your worth is dependent on what happens after death, then your power no longer belongs to you. It belongs to whoever claims to hold the keys to your salvation. And so, slowly, methodically, the doctrine of reincarnation was removed, buried, ridiculed, or outlawed. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was dangerous. Dangerous to systems that thrive on fear. Dangerous to rulers who build empires on obedience. Dangerous to religious authorities who need you to believe that they are your only path to the divine. The truth is, when you remember that your soul has lived before, you begin to live differently. You stop living in panic, afraid that this one life defines your eternal fate. You stop accepting oppression, injustice, or shame as your cosmic destiny. You start to ask deeper questions. You start to reclaim your own timeline. And most importantly, you realize that no external authority can define your relationship with the universe, because you've already had many. You've already walked beside the divine, again and again, in body after body, role after role. And you don't need permission to keep remembering. That's why this knowledge had to be hidden. And they didn't just erase it from the books. They erased it from you, from your childhood teachings, from your language, from your cultural references. They told you dreams were meaningless, that intuition was fantasy, that strange memories were just imagination, that children who remembered other lives were just going through a phase. They replaced your soul's deep inner knowing with memorized prayers and rigid systems. They made you doubt yourself, doubt your feelings, doubt the moments that didn't fit the script. But still, it persisted, like a flicker beneath the surface, a stubborn whisper in the back of your consciousness. You've felt it, You've had those moments where you knew something you couldn't have learned, where you felt something ancient rise inside you, where you looked in someone's eyes and thought, I know you. That's not programming. That's your soul breaking through the static. That's the truth showing its face. Ancient texts that did speak of reincarnation were either destroyed, rewritten, or locked away. Temples that honored past lives were overtaken or rebranded. Oral traditions were erased through conquest and colonization. The few fragments that remained were reinterpreted to fit a linear narrative: one life, one judgment, one eternal outcome. That story kept people in line. It made them afraid to step outside the box. It kept them small. And small people don't ask big questions. But what happens when you start asking anyway? What happens when you begin to trace your soul's fingerprint across timelines? When you follow your own inner evidence, the dreams, the déjà vu, the talents, the trauma, and start to piece together a tapestry that defies everything you were taught, you wake up. You realize you've been here before. You see your enemies and lovers and teachers not as random characters, but as recurring soul contracts. You stop blaming your circumstances and start seeing your life as a sacred continuation. You realize that you are not just living, you are evolving. And no one can stop that. This is what they didn't want you to know. That karma isn't a punishment, it's a pathway. That trauma can be inherited not just through blood, but through the soul's own experiences. That healing can stretch backward through time. That every choice you make now not only changes your future, but can bring peace to a version of you that once suffered in silence. That this life is not a test, it's an opportunity, a continuation, a completion. And perhaps most dangerously, they didn't want you to know that your power has always been inside you. Not in a building, not in a title, not in a sacred text that only certain people are allowed to read. But in your own memory, your own intuition, your own ability to remember. Because when you remember, you don't need intermediaries. You don't need to be saved. You just need space to heal and space to grow. They replaced sacred memory with dogma. They turned divine cycles into linear threats. But your soul has never played by those rules. It has lived as priest and prisoner, queen and servant, warrior and monk. It has loved, lost, created, and destroyed. And through it all, it has carried one sacred truth. You are eternal. You are more than the script you were handed. You are more than the version of history written by victors. You are more than what they told you was possible. That's why, even now, the idea of past lives still carries a strange charge. It makes some people scoff, others fear it. It's dismissed as nonsense or fantasy. But why? Why is it threatening to believe that the soul continues? Because deep down, everyone remembers. Even the ones who deny it, especially the ones who fear it. They remember in their dreams, in their gut. In the tremble of old grief they can't explain. In the magnetic pull toward places and people that make no sense on paper. It's there, under the surface, waiting. And once you begin to awaken that memory, you start to see through the illusion. You realize that the systems built to control you were never sacred. They were just clever. You begin to listen to your own inner voice again. The one that says, you've been here before. You know what to do. You are not alone. The war on memory isn't over. But the truth is stronger than the systems that tried to bury it. And when you remember, even a little, you become dangerous, not because you'll destroy the world, but because you'll stop being afraid of it. You'll stop being afraid of death, of failure, of judgment, because you'll know, this isn't the end. It never was. And maybe that's why you're here now, reading this, feeling something ancient stir inside you, not to be convinced, but to be reminded, not to be taught, but to remember. What if I told you that remembering your past lives isn't just an interesting detour into spiritual trivia, it's one of the most powerful tools you have for healing your present life? That the strange, unexplainable pieces of your personality, your pain, your gifts, and your struggles all begin to make sense the moment you realize this isn't your first time here. You've lived before. You've loved before. You've lost before. And every one of those experiences is still echoing inside you. So the question becomes, now that you know this, what do you do with it? You begin by facing what your soul has been trying to show you all along. The patterns that won't go away. the relationships that trigger you in ways that don't match the circumstances, the emotional wounds that feel deeper than this life could have possibly caused. These aren't coincidences, they're invitations. Your soul isn't trying to punish you, it's trying to speak, to remember, to release. One of the most direct ways to access this memory is through past life regression. Not the kind you see in dramatic movies where people scream and cry their way through entire centuries, but gentle, focused sessions where you are guided into a relaxed, meditative state and allowed to access the memories already stored in your soul's subconscious field. You're not making anything up. You're tuning into something that's already there, just beneath the surface. A regression doesn't always show you the entire story. Often, it gives you a single scene, an emotion, a flash, or a symbolic moment that speaks directly to what you're currently living through. And more often than not, that's all it takes to shift everything. People have emerged from regressions knowing exactly why they've always had pain in a certain part of their body, why they've always felt drawn to a certain place, why they've been terrified of water or fire or abandonment since childhood. Others come back with sudden emotional relief, the kind of release that comes from finally understanding the root of something they've carried their entire life. It's not magic, it's memory. And when you unlock the memory, you begin to take back the energy that was once trapped there. But you don't need a regressionist to begin this work. You can start by observing your life through a new lens. Notice your emotional triggers. Track your dreams. Watch for recurring symbols, especially ones that show up during times of transition, conflict, or awakening. Keep a journal specifically for spiritual memory. Write down places you feel unnaturally drawn to, professions or skills that feel deeply familiar, and stories or historical periods that stir something inside you. These are your soul's breadcrumbs. Follow them. Healing through past life awareness isn't about becoming obsessed with who you were. It's about freeing who you are now. Because when you understand the context behind your wounds, you stop blaming yourself for having them. You stop thinking you're broken or weak or defective. You realize you're carrying energy that didn't begin here. And once you know that, you can finally let it go. It's also about honoring the gifts you've brought with you. Maybe you've always had a natural talent for healing, or leading, or creating beauty from chaos. Maybe you're deeply intuitive, or able to read energy, or feel what other people feel without trying. These aren't random traits. They're skills your soul has refined across lifetimes. You didn't earn them in this one, you arrived with them. And when you own them, fully, without apology, you step into the power you were meant to carry all along. But with ancient gifts comes ancient responsibility. Protecting your energy becomes non-negotiable when you start walking this path. The more you remember who you are, the more sensitive you become. The more open your field, the more you must choose what enters it. Create spiritual hygiene rituals. Cleanse your space. Set clear, energetic boundaries. Don't just protect your body, protect your timeline. Not everything and not everyone deserves access to the version of you that's finally awakening. As your awareness deepens, so will your sense of identity. You'll start to see yourself less as a fixed personality and more as a multidimensional being, a soul in motion. You'll recognize that your trauma doesn't define you, but your choices do. You'll realize that healing isn't about perfection, it's about wholeness. And the more you remember, the more you begin to reclaim the fragments of yourself that got lost across centuries. Reclaiming your true identity isn't about dressing like a pharaoh or adopting the customs of another culture. It's about integrating the essence of who you've always been, the strength you carried as a warrior, the compassion you lived as a healer, the wisdom you practiced as a monk, the creativity you embodied as an artist. These are soul archetypes that still live inside you. You don't need to recreate the costume. You need to embody the vibration. And, with that remembrance, comes purpose. You start to see that your presence here now, at this time, on this planet, in this particular body, isn't random. You were called to continue a journey that stretches across centuries. The ancestors you once were are watching through your eyes. The choices you make now ripple across timelines. And every step you take toward healing, truth, and alignment sends shockwaves of transformation through the lives you've lived and the ones you've yet to experience. So what do you do with this knowledge? You live consciously, you love bravely, you listen to the whispers, not the noise. You take every strange pull, every irrational fear, every powerful dream, and every unexplainable longing, and treat it like a compass. You sit with your pain and ask it what it remembers. You hold space for your gifts, and ask them what they want to become. You treat your life not as a beginning, but as a continuation. Not as a single act, but as one note in a divine symphony. And above all else, you remember. You remember that your soul has walked through fire and forest and city and silence. That it has died and lived and lost and loved and chosen to come back, not to suffer, but to evolve. Not to repeat, but to complete. You are not a blank slate. You are a story still being told. What if I told you that your soul has never truly forgotten anything? That beneath the noise of your thoughts, beneath the conditioning you were born into, beneath the name you answer to, and the identity you've built, there is a vast archive of experience. A living memory bank that holds every lifetime you've ever lived. You've been here before. You've loved, lost, created, destroyed, learned, forgotten, and remembered again. You've played every role the human story has to offer: teacher, student, warrior, parent, child, victim, villain, healer, mystic, and every one of those lives left an imprint, a frequency, a whisper. You may not consciously remember all the details, the cities you walked through, the names you once answered to, the hands you held in other centuries, but your soul does, and it has kept the score, not as punishment, but as poetry, not as judgment, but as continuity. The pain you can't explain, the people you feel drawn to for no reason, the fears that make no rational sense, the gifts you didn't have to earn, all of it is residue from the lifetimes that came before this one. You are not starting from scratch, you are continuing a legacy. By now, you've likely seen the signs. That deep sense of déjà vu that hits you in the middle of a normal day and makes the hairs on your arms stand up. That moment when you walk into a place you've never been and feel like you know where everything is. The irrational fear that you've carried since childhood, even though nothing in this life explains it. The skill you just picked up like it was already inside you, waiting to be remembered. The person who walked into your life and instantly felt like family or something more. The dreams that feel too vivid, too emotional, too real to be just dreams. The birthmark that matches the scar of someone long dead. The way you light up when you hear the music of a distant land or see the symbols of a forgotten era. The patterns that repeat themselves in your relationships, your finances, your sense of self, as if you're trying to finish something that started long ago. These aren't coincidences. They are breadcrumbs from your soul, proof that your spirit has history. You've lived and died, and lived again. And each time, you carried forward something unfinished. Some love that needed to bloom fully. Some truth that needed to be spoken out loud. Some lesson that had to be faced with new eyes. Some gift that was meant to evolve. The patterns that show up in your current life are not just psychological, they are energetic. They are karmic echoes asking for your awareness. And the moment you recognize them for what they are, opportunities, not obstacles, you begin to reclaim your timeline. Your soul didn't come here to be perfect, it came here to be whole. And wholeness requires memory. It requires that you listen to the parts of yourself that don't speak in words, the sensations, the gut feelings, the tears that rise unexpectedly when you read a passage or hear a song or stand beneath a certain kind of sky. You are being spoken to, not by some external force, but by your own soul, by the ancient part of you that never forgot. This is the invitation, to stop living as if this is your first time here, to release the illusion that you are brand new, to understand that you are a soul in motion, a traveler through timelines. You didn't just wake up one day with a personality and preferences and problems. You brought them with you. You were born carrying stories. And even though most of the world taught you to ignore those stories, to doubt them, to mock them, your soul kept whispering. Every time you felt a surge of knowing that couldn't be explained. Every time you met someone and felt like they already lived in your heart. Every time a dream showed you a version of yourself you didn't recognize, but somehow remembered. That was your soul, trying to help you remember. You don't need to recall every past life to know that they shaped you. The patterns alone will tell you. And the moment you bring awareness to those patterns, when you stop blaming yourself and start listening, you begin to unlock everything you've been carrying. The trauma that needs release. The wisdom that needs expression. the connections that need healing. You begin to walk this life not just with eyes open, but with your soul awake. The truth is, you were never meant to do this blindly. You were never meant to stumble through life disconnected from your essence. You were meant to remember, slowly, gently, at your own pace, but you were always meant to remember. And now that you've seen the signs, now that the pieces are beginning to click into place, you can't go back to sleep, because something inside you has been stirred, not just curiosity, but recognition. You are not the story you've been told. You are not just a body with a name and a job and a list of responsibilities. You are an eternal being. You are the continuation of hundreds, maybe thousands, of lives. And your existence now is not an accident. It's the next chapter, the next chance to heal, to love, to create, to forgive, to speak, to rise. Maybe you were silenced in a past life, and now you're here to speak. Maybe you were betrayed, and now you're here to choose love anyway. Maybe you ran from your purpose, and now you're being called to embody it fully. Whatever the pattern, whatever the pain, whatever the longing, you're not just imagining it, you're remembering, and memory is the beginning of freedom. This is what it means to be awake, not just spiritually, but soulfully. To live in this moment with the full awareness that you are standing on centuries of experience. That your fears are not flaws, they are echoes. That your talents are not accidents, they are inheritance. That your path is not random, it is sacred continuation. You are the bridge between what has been and what could be. You are the healing your past selves prayed for. So listen closely now, to the whispers, to the loves that haunt you, to the fears that won't go away, to the places that call your name, to the symbols that feel like home, to the strange tears that come from nowhere. Your soul is speaking. Your soul remembers. Even if your mind forgets, your body knows. Even if your thoughts question it, your energy tells the truth. Even if no one around you understands, you are still allowed to honor what you feel. Because you are more than one lifetime. You are a traveler between worlds, a carrier of light, a student of time, a being of memory, and whether you realize it or not, you're waking up.